With the addition of 4 new Warcries as well as massive changes to some existing ones, two-hander playstyles including the new Slam archetype might be getting some pretty massive gameplay buffs. But will it be enough to make them worth picking over anything else? Hey guys, Big Ducks here, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be talking about the new Warcry information that got released, as well as some that benefit summoners, and a Warcry that functions similarly to the Saviour sword off of Cirrus. Also, we're going to talk about some updates to the skill tree as well as the new Warcry keystone. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for the latest up-to-date news about Path of Exile 3.11 Harvest League, and also consider giving me a like to help out the video. And without further ado, let's get into it. So now GGG has made some basic fundamental changes to how Warcries work. They still perform very similarly to how they did before, but the amount of enemies nearby is now going to be determined off of the rarity of the monster itself. Like magic enemies, rare enemies, and unique enemies are all going to give more stacks. This is something that I felt has been needed for quite a while, because Warcries felt okay when you had like a bunch of enemies near you, right? But if you're fighting one target, it just kind of felt useless, yeah? The new Warcry cluster jewels that we got last league actually helped a bit with this, because you could get some like base level of Warcries, but now maybe those won't be as needed since, you know, unique mobs are supposedly going to count as 20 enemies. In addition to that, all Warcries are now going to be powering up your next few attacks with a ability called Exert, which I'm not too happy about that name. It kind of sounds weird to me, but that's what they've chosen at this point. So what that means is that when you use a Warcry, each one's going to have a specific exert that it does, and it's going to make the next few attacks that you do much more powerful. There also seems to be a new Warcry support that reduces like the amount of time that it takes to cast the Warcry or something like that, but with the ability to have instant Warcries, I'm not sure how useful that's going to be. We'll have to see what it says. Speaking of that, the new keystone that we're getting is called Call to Arms. It's a Warcry specific keystone that's going to make it so that when you Warcry, it is instant, similar to how Battle Cry worked in the past. I'm pretty certain that they're going to take off the instant Warcry cast from Battle Cry and bake it into this new ability. However, this keystone does have a downside. It makes it so that all of your Warcries share cooldowns now, so you can't just spam them back to back, because that's how they're going to be working in the future. You're going to be able to use multiple Warcries, they all won't share the same cooldown anymore, and that's the downside of this new keystone. This is probably because GGG wants it to actually feel like there's some kind of investment into going into Warcries, instead of it just being like, oh yeah, I'll just add a Warcry onto this build just because, you know? They want to kind of give it more of an identity, and a lot of them have got some pretty good identity built into them now, so let's talk about them. So the first one we're going to talk about is Rallying Cry. Now, Rallying Cry, as you knew before, used to give you some mana regen. It also gave you increased damage. Now what it's going to be doing is it's actually going to be giving you and your nearby allies, which includes minions, a percentage of your main hand weapons damage. And that's based on how many enemies are nearby. I'm assuming it's going to give you more percentage of the weapon's damage. Now the first thing that comes to mind here is Dominating Blow. You're going to be summoning your own enemies, and you're also going to be hitting pretty hard because Dominating Blow is a melee attack. So between allies from Herald of Purity and Dominating Blow itself, you should have quite a few allies nearby, which will make this Warcry work really well with it. It also is probably pretty good in group play, but let's be real here, there's not very many people that play in big groups. The next ability that we have is Intimidating Cry. So this is something that was available previously through the Ferul's Chase unique boots, and it like procced on Cat's stealth ending, I think is what it was. But now it's just kind of going to be the go-to cookie cutter damage Warcry, kind of similar to how Enduring Cry was just like the defensive one. What it does now is that it provides a buff that ignores a percentage of the enemy's physical damage resistance, and it also makes your next few attacks deal double damage. That's pretty nuts, right? Like, double damage is not a weak effect. We'll see how many attacks it actually affects, and depending on that, it might be pretty insane. Now, I spoke about Enduring Cry, and Enduring Cry is mostly staying the same. It's still going to give you endurance charges, it's still going to give you a burst of health regeneration, but now it's also going to be giving slight physical DR and resistances. Now, they just said resistances. I'm not sure if that includes chaos, but they did not say elemental, so we'll have to see. One thing about Enduring Cry is that it doesn't actually give you the exert buff, and it doesn't make you do any extra effect on your next hit. It's the only one that doesn't do that because they're trying to keep it as the defensive Warcry. Now let's get on to some of the interesting ones. This first one is called Ancestral Cry. Now this is basically Ancestral Call, but on steroids. it gives what looks like, from the video that you can probably see here, just insane range under your strike abilities. I mean, it looks like 10 times the range of what Ancestral Call gives you. It makes it so that it hits multiple targets simultaneously. Just think like a very, very big Ancestral Call. The thing that I wonder about is, does this work with Ancestral Call? Does it hit like 40 enemies if you do both at the same time? The true question here is, how is this gonna function with Flicker Strike? Because I'm pretty curious to see how that's gonna work. This is just gonna be one of those ones that we're just gonna have to test and see how it works. The next one is Seismic Cry. This is the slam-based Warcry that they kind of alluded to early on. It gives your next slam huge area of effect, and it also makes it so that each consecutive slam does more and more damage. An interesting side note about this ability is that it knocks back and also interrupts. Something interesting is that interrupt is not something that GGG uses very often, that wordage, so we're gonna have to see if that's actually a piece of what it says in the gem itself. Another thing is that it also reduces the enemy stun threshold by a bit, making it a bit easier to stun enemies. But we're gonna have to see a little bit more information about this. It just seems like the go-to Warcry for slam builds. The next one is probably the one I'm most interested in. This one is called General's Cry. Now what this does is, it is a skill support hybrid. Think like what Spellslinger is, where it's a support, but you can actually link gems to it, and it causes it to do more damage, or do different effects. Now what this does is it makes nearby corpses stand up and use the linked skill to hit your nearby enemies. So it's basically like a temporary savior for all enemies' corpses that are around you. I have no idea what to think about this Warcry. It's kind of ridiculous, and I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about it. So comment down below and let me know what kind of attacks you think this is gonna be most useful for. Keep in mind that it is melee attacks only. Some of the things that I'm thinking about is like, how does Dominating Blow work with this? How does Flicker Strike work with this? Chain Hook? And what about things like Infernal Blow? Is this just gonna make it so that they can like go out and just explode the whole screen in front of you? I really don't know. There's probably a bunch of ideas, so let me know yours. And the last ability that we have is Infernal Cry. This is basically a reworked version of Abyssal Cry. So rest in peace Abyssal Cry, and hello Infernal Cry. This is all the things that it used to before, but kind of in a more fiery manner now. So you do the Warcry, it debuffs all the enemies around you, and when they die, they explode for fire damage. However, on top of that, it also covers them in ash. Now, this is something that you probably know from some uniques, as well as the Chieftain Ascendancy. It causes them to take more fire damage. On top of that, it also gives us a new effect called Combust, which makes it so that the next couple attacks that you do trigger this like AoE fire explosion kind of thing that scales with your attack damage as well as any supports that you have on the attack. So honestly, this is kind of looking pretty good for fire builds, so Tectonic Boys, be on the lookout. And that's pretty much all the information that we have on the new Warcries. I'm really interested to see what this leads to, because a lot of these seem very open-ended in what you can do with them. Specifically the General's Cry, as well as Ancestral Cry. I'm super interested to see what people do with those. So we're just gonna have to see what they say in the patch notes. And beyond that, remember, if this video helped you out, make sure to give it a like. And also, if you want more content similar to this, consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, and stay safe out there in raid class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.